Okay, let's learn about UV mapping. We'll start off and make a cereal box looking thing here. Very nice. Now we'll go up here and open up the UV texture editor by clicking this button, or by going up here to Window, UV texture editor. And we'll get something that looks like this. So the UV texture editor is a window that can be manipulated with the same controls that we manipulate our regular windows out here. So if I hold down Alt or Option and then middle mouse click and drag, I can pan, I can middle mouse roll and zoom in and out. So in the UV space we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 faces. That corresponds to our 6 faces of our cube out here. You'll notice that these are just set to the basic default cube, so these are all perfectly square. And our cereal box is obviously not perfectly square, so we need to get our UVs to correspond to the geometry out here in 3D space. Here's how we're going to do that. Make sure you have the polygons menu selected, and then go up here to, with the object selected, to Edit UVs, Unfold. When you do that, our UVs now correspond to the proportions of our cereal box. Just as our viewport controls work in here in the UV texture editor, so too do our transform controls over here, so we can move, rotate, and scale with the same shortcuts. So since we're in UV space over here, we're going to select the UVs themselves to move, and the UVs correspond basically to these vertex points. So we'll right click on this and we'll choose UV. Then we can just click and drag to select the UVs. They turn green. We can hit W for the move tool and move these up. Then we can hit R for scale and scale this. Now, just as a little quirk, Maya, you can grab the middle box, but it's really easy for it to go in the only one direction, which we don't want, so we want to make sure to click somewhere kind of towards the middle of the box, and then you'll get a uniform scale. And we just want to get this so it's pretty close to the maximum size of our gray area here of our texture. Alright, now that we've got this set up, we can go up here to our texture editor menu and choose polygons and then UV snapshot. Now, quick note, if this menu is not showing up, the shortcut is Shift M, which toggles that menu as well as the viewport menus on and off. Anyway, polygons, UV snapshot. Calls up this dialog box. By default, it will send the image that we're creating here, which is basically this, our UV snapshot. It's going to go into the images folder of your projects folder, and the default name will be out UV. And the size, I recommend something like 1024 is pretty good, so you can put those values in there. And let's go for right now image format. Let's just use a JPEG. Okay. Alright, so we will hit OK. We'll probably get an error here, but no worries, it's very common. Let me show you. OK, here's our error. You must select a valid object. So I had left this in UV mode. No problem, just go out here, change it to object mode, select the object. Now we can just say OK, and we don't get that error. Great. Once we've got our UV snapshot exported, we'll go to Photoshop, and we will open it up in Photoshop. There it is, outuv.jpg. And we get this. Now by default, this is black with white lines representing the UVs. We're going to switch that up here. I'm going to double click on my layer here, background, It'll rename it to layer 0 so we can move it. Now I'm going to go up here to Image, Adjustments, Invert to make it black on white. And now I'm going to open up a file to use as my texture. So File, Open. Let's use our, under Source Images, Basic Stone. Open that up. Select all, copy, and I'll just paste it in here. It puts the stone on its own layer. I'm going to rename these UVs and stone. I'm going to drag the UV layer on top of the stone, and I'm going to change the blending mode of the UV layer to multiply, which will drop out the white, and so I'm just left with the black lines and I can see through. And then I can go ahead and readjust the size here, scaling this down. My stone looks good. So you can spend hours and hours and hours working on texture maps, but we're not going to spend too much time on this because we're just going to finish this demo. So I'm going to go ahead and add another layer here, and I'll just kind of do something goofy so we can kind of see what we've got here. So I'll make like some kind of lovely face on here. Oops. And just to kind of show you how this works, we'll have some lines here going across the UVs there. Great. And I'll write here back, and I'll write here bottom. And since this is going to wrap around, I'll need to reverse this back here. So I'll take this, Control T, or Command T rather on the Mac, and flip that around and hit Enter, and Command D to deselect. And now I've got this lovely texture. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the UVs so those don't get transferred because we don't want to have black lines on our object. And then I'm just going to go over here to File, Save. This will save my Photoshop file with the layers, which I always want to do. And when we're making texture maps, the default location is to look for this in Source Images in our Projects folder. So I'll go to Source Images. And I'm going to save this. I'm going to give it a name. I'll call it stonyman.psd. Okay. Now, we can ultimately use PSD files for our textures, but just for the purpose of the demo today, I'd rather have you guys save out a JPEG. So we'll go up here to File, Save for Web, or Save As, or Export into the new version of Photoshop. I'm just going to do this. And then I'm going to save this as a JPEG. And PNGs work too, but let's just do it as a JPEG just because we'll avoid any problems with transparency. Alright, JPEG, very high, that's good, and save. And I'm going to save this again to our project file into the source images so we can find it when we go to make our texture. And stonyman.jpg, save. Okay, great. Sure. Alright. So now we jump back to Maya. Excellent. Back in Maya, I'm going to close the UV texture editor. I'm going to right click on my object. I'm going to choose Assign New Material here. It's going to call up my Create tab. I'm going to choose Blinn. And I'm going to go over here in the attribute editor to the color channel, instead of clicking on the box to just assign it a regular old color, I'm going to click on this little black and white checker flag here next to color, and that's going to bring up the Create Render Node tab, and I'm going to choose File right here, File. Now that's going to call up yet another node in the attribute editor, and it's going to have under File Attributes a line called Image Name, and then a folder over here that's going to allow me, if I click on it, to find my Stony Man. And if you set this up right, it should jump right into your source images folder in your project folder. So pick stonyman.jpg, open it up, and there we go. If it doesn't show up right away, sometimes you have to turn on the Show Textures button up here in your View panel. And so we have successfully done our first UV map. There's the bottom, our first texture combined with our UV map. You can see how these wrap seamlessly around the sides there, and because we turned our back around there, so to speak, it's right side up, and we see our bottom is also accounted for. So that's the way that you create a UV map that matches the proportions of your box, and how you export the UV snapshot to bring into Photoshop to use as a reference to create a custom map that you will be able to fit exactly to your object.